Sometimes when we are contemplating those big questions that life brings, sometimes when we're thinking about God or nature or just the wonder that life is, we just don't have the words, do we? And in those moments, we're given the gift of the Word of God. Words that wash over us. Words that describe the indescribable. Words that help us to glimpse a little bit more of who God is and how God acts in creation and in our lives. I'd like you to watch this video now by Rob Bell as he shows us, demonstrates the words that God spoke to Job in this story when Job demanded a trial, demanded that God tell him what he had done wrong to deserve such punishment. And so watch and listen as God speaks.
There's an old story about a man named Job. It's one of the oldest stories ever told. Now, Job is a good man. In fact, the storyteller insists that Job is the greatest man in his whole part of the earth. Job is a good man, but he's also a wealthy man. He's got land and crops, and he's got animals, and he's got servants, and he's got a house full of kids. But in this story, everything falls apart for Job. Much of his wealth is stolen. The rest is consumed by fire, and then in a tragic accident, his kids are killed. And as if that isn't more agony that one person can bear, he ends up with these painful sores all over his body. So we find him sitting in ashes, mourning his loss. And he's got this broken shard of pottery, and he's scraping his skin just to try and get some relief. And his wife says to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." And then Job's friends come, and they sit with him, and they discuss what's happened. And they each have their opinions about why Job is suffering like this. And so they take turns giving their answers and explanations, because that's what we want, isn't it? When we suffer, we want answers and explanations. We want to know why. Why do bad things happen to good people? I mean, is it just fate or chance or bad luck? Is it some sort of divine judgment or punishment? Or are we pawns in some sort of larger cosmic wager? And so they give their answers and explanations, and Job defends himself, and they give their opinions, and Job comes back with his perspective on everything. And so they debate, and they discuss, and they question, and they confront. And then, in the end, when everybody has had their chance to speak, God speaks. God speaks out of the whirlwind. And when God speaks, we find out that God has questions for Job. God asks Job, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge. Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? And tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the cloud its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said to the ocean, this far you may come, but no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. Job, have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light. Their upraised arm is broken. Have you ever journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you understand. What is the way to the abode of light? Or where does darkness reside? Can you show them to their places? What is the way to their dwellings? I mean, surely you know, for you are already born. You have lived so many years. Where is the place where the snow is stored? Have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? I mean, where is the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, or makes a path for the thunderstorm, that it may water a land with no one in it, a desert where no man lives, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout forth with grass? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone and the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you cut loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or let out the bear and its cubs? Do you know the laws of heaven? Can you set up dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice above the clouds? Can you cover yourself in a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do the lightning bolts say to you, here we are? Who endowed the heart with wisdom, or gave understanding to the mind? Who has wisdom to count the clouds, or tip over the water jars of the heavens, when the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together? Do you hunt the prey for the lioness to satisfy the hunger of the lions, while they crouch in their den or lie in wait in their thicket? Who provides food for the raven when their young cry out and they wander about in search of food? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? Do you know the times they give birth? They crouch down and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and they grow strong in the wild. They leave and they do not return. Who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied his ropes? I gave him the desert as his home, the salt flats as his habitat. He laughs at the commotion in town. He does not hear the shout of the driver. He ranges the hills looking for pasture, seeking out any green thing. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will he stay by your manger at night? Can you hold him to the furrow with the harness? Will he till the valley behind you? Can you rely on him for his great strength? Can you leave your heavy work to him? Can you trust him to gather together the grain and bring it to the threshing floor? The wings of an ostrich flap joyfully, but they are nothing compared to the pinions and feathers of a stork. She lays her eggs on the ground. She lets them warm in the sand. She is unmindful that a foot may crush them, or a wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly, as if they aren't even hers, as if her labor was in vain. She wasn't endowed with wisdom or given her share of good sense. Yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. Do you give the horse his mighty strength? Do you clothe his neck with a flowing mane? Do you make him leap like a locust, striking terror with his proud snorts? He paws fiercely, rejoicing in his strength. He charges into the fray. He laughs at fear. He's afraid of nothing. He does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles by his side, as does the flashing spear and the lance. In frenzied excitement, he eats up the ground. He cannot stand still when he hears the trumpet blast. When he hears the trumpet blast from afar, he snorts and he smells the battle scent from afar. He hears the shout of the commander and the battle cry. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom as he spreads his wings to the south? Does the eagle soar by your command as he builds his nest on high? He dwells high on a cliff, stays there at night. The rocky crag is his stronghold. From there, he seeks out his food. His eyes can detect it from afar. His young, they feast on blood, and where the slain are, there he is. And then God said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. And then Job said, I am unworthy. Who am I to reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. We want answers, don't we? We want explanations. We want to know why we suffer like we do. Could somebody please explain this? And there are times when the only honest, healthy, human thing to possibly do is to shout your question and shake your fist and rage against the heavens and demand an explanation. But true wisdom, the kind we find here with Job, the kind that endures, the kind that sustains a person through suffering, that kind of wisdom knows when to speak and when to be silent. Because your story is not over. The last word has not been spoken. And there may be way more going on here than any of us realize. So may you be released from always having to understand why everything happens the way that it does. May this freedom open you up to all sorts of new perspectives. And may you have the wisdom to know when to say, I spoke once, but now I will say no more.
Weren't those words beautiful? Didn't they just wash over you and fill you with wonder? God was trying to speak to what Job's deep, essential problem was. And it was this, that Job believed that what God wanted from him and from all of us is to be righteous. And in his mind, what that meant was morally superior. Never doing anything wrong, living an upright life. And Job believed deep inside himself that not only was God punishing him for some moral act, although Job had no idea what it was, But Job's vision or image of God was one of a harsh judge who looks at our lives, who keeps track of all the good and bad choices we make, and who, at the end of the day, judges us on each of those. And so when we listen to God's response to Job, we can hear very clearly that God's real intention for creation and for you and for me has nothing to do with moral superiority. God saw the problem of our brokenness, our separation from God and from each other. He saw the pain and the anguish it causes us. And so God's solution was to come in the person of Jesus Christ, to live and to die and to be raised to new life, so that you and I never, ever have to fear God, so that we don't have to live in a condition of brokenness. Rather, we can be reconciled to Him. And we heard that great promise in Paul's letter to the church in Rome today. For while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ died for us. And so you see, that is the solution to Job's problem. The solution has to do with understanding and receiving who God really is. The one who loves us so much that He's promised that He'll never separate from us. The one who loves us so much that when He saw our brokenness, He came and died so that we could live. It's not about superiority of any kind. It's about trusting this one, bringing all of our joys and sorrows, our questions, our grief, our pain to God. And then, in God's amazing majesty and presence, when there are no more words for us to say, simply standing in silence in His presence. Thanks be to God. Amen.